The Galactic Council was a monumental assembly, a collection of representatives from hundreds of species spread across the galaxy. These species had diverse interests, cultures, and technologies, but they were united by one central goal: to maintain order and peace across the stars. It was a place where decisions that affected the entire galaxy were made. And today, the eyes of every delegate in the chamber were fixed on a singular issue: humanity. Earth's sudden rise to power had unsettled the Council, and the summit was called to determine how to handle this unexpected player in the galactic politics. The representatives sat in an expansive chamber aboard the Council's flagship, the Elysium, a ship that was both a symbol of power and a center of governance. In this room, the representatives were seated according to their species status, each surrounded by holographic displays and attendants. On one side, the insectoid Thraxians clicked their mandibles in a rhythm that some might call anxious, while the slimy aquatic Osmians exchanged glances. The room buzzed with whispers, anticipation thick in the air. Everyone was waiting for the human ambassador to speak. The human race, barely 3 centuries into their space-faring journey, had caught the attention of the galaxy, and now the Council had called them in. The Council had expected humanity to be just another fleeting civilization, easily subdued by the advanced technologies and overwhelming power of the established galactic species. But what the Council did not expect was that humanity would rise to the occasion, building weapons and technologies that matched, and in some cases even surpassed, those of older civilizations. The humans had demonstrated remarkable resourcefulness, adaptability, and most importantly, an unyielding will to survive. In the past decade alone, they had navigated a difficult war against the insectoid Thraxians, brokered alliances with the once hostile Selenoc traders, and even pushed back incursions from a rogue band of Varnak marauders. The Council could no longer ignore them. The central figure in the room was the human ambassador, a woman named Sarah Lawson. She was not the typical representative the Council was used to seeing. Most of the ambassadors were older, their species having existed for millennia, with a sense of wisdom that came with age. But Sarah was young by galactic standards. She was only in her mid-30s, a time when most humans would still be focused on their careers or raising families. But Sarah had already become one of the most influential leaders on Earth, a war hero and diplomat, chosen for her ability to think quickly under pressure. She stood at the center of the chamber, her eyes scanning the room. The Council had expected her to be nervous, perhaps even intimidated, by the overwhelming presence of so many species. Instead, she was calm, composed, her demeanor one of quiet confidence. She was a representative of Earth, and she would not back down. The room fell silent as she began speaking, her voice clear and measured. "Honorable members of the Galactic Council," Sarah began, her voice reverberating across the Grand Hall. "I come before you today not as a representative of a weak species, but as a leader of a people who have fought tooth and nail to secure a future among the stars. Earth has faced challenges that many of your species cannot even imagine. We have fought wars, endured famine, and faced extinction from within. Yet here we stand, united and strong, ready to take our place in the galaxy, not as subjects, but as equals." The Council members listened, their eyes narrowing. There were murmurs, some skeptical, others intrigued. The Zethar delegate, a towering figure with shimmering blue skin, leaned forward, his sharp eyes never leaving Sarah. The Zethar had been one of the first races to colonize neighboring systems, and they saw themselves as the true rulers of the galaxy. They were particularly wary of humanity's rapid growth and were already plotting ways to keep Earth in check. The Thraxian representative, a giant insect-like creature with glowing red eyes, hissed softly, but his words were sharp. "You speak of equality, human, but do you understand the balance of power in the galaxy? We've been maintaining this peace for centuries, and your sudden rise could unravel it all. What makes you think Earth deserves a place at this table?" Sarah didn't flinch. She had anticipated the question, and she had an answer ready. "We do not expect to be handed a place, nor do we desire to disrupt the balance. What we seek is a seat at the table where our voices are heard. We are not here to dominate the galaxy. We are here to participate in it. Humanity has always thrived in adversity, and we offer our strength, not as conquerors, but as allies. The room grew quiet again, the delegates exchanging glances. The Thraxians were known for their aggression, and the Zethar for their strategic cunning. Both were powerful, ancient species, and they were not easily swayed by the promises of a young, untested species like humanity. But there was something in Sarah's voice, a conviction that resonated even among those who had never seen Earth or its people. Humanity's struggle for survival had been hard-earned, and that resilience had earned them respect, whether the council members liked it or not. One of the Tselnok representatives, a species with a thin, elongated body and long antennae, raised a hand. "What guarantees do you offer, Ambassador Lawson? You claim peace and equality, but in the past, humans have shown a tendency to act out of desperation. How do we know that you will not endanger the peace that has held for so long?" The question was valid. Humanity had fought wars for survival before, and although they had learned from those experiences, there were still many doubts among the galactic species. Some saw humans as a potential threat, others as a wild card in the delicate balance of power. Sarah could feel the weight of their eyes on her, the pressure mounting, but she remained calm. "We offer you our word," she said, her tone firm but not aggressive. "Humanity will honor the peace. But understand this, if the peace is broken, we will not stand idly by. We will not be anyone's pawn." The council chamber fell into silence once more. The words hung in the air, thick with meaning. It was a challenge, but it was also a warning. The humans were not here to bend or break, to submit or comply. They were here to stand their ground. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence stretched on, making the tension palpable. Then, the Zethar representative spoke, his voice low but laced with venom. "Humanity has made its position clear," he said. "Now we will see if it holds." With those words, the council session reached its breaking point. The uneasy peace that had held the galaxy together for centuries was now at risk. The stage had been set. Would humanity find its place in the galaxy, or would it become the spark that ignited a new war among the stars? The future hung in the balance. The room fell into a deep silence, the weight of Sarah's declaration hanging in the air like a thick fog. The Galactic Council, once the unquestioned authority across the stars, now found itself facing an unexpected challenge. Humanity had made its stance clear. They were no longer willing to be subjugated, no longer willing to be pawns in a game controlled by older, more established species. The delegates who had once assumed humanity would bend to their will now sat stunned, unsure of how to proceed. For centuries, the Galactic Council had held absolute power. It was the institution that governed the stars, dictating terms of peace and war, shaping the fates of countless civilizations. But now, in the midst of this grand summit, humanity had thrown a wrench into their well-oiled machine. Their refusal to participate in the Council's negotiations was more than just a political stance. It was an open challenge to the very idea of intergalactic authority. Sarah stood in the center of the chamber, unwavering. She had been prepared for a reaction, perhaps a hostile one, but nothing could have fully prepared her for the sudden, overwhelming shift in the atmosphere. The murmurs started softly, but quickly escalated into sharp, clipped conversations between the delegates. The older species, the ones who had held power for eons, were now questioning their assumptions. Were humans really ready to take such a bold step, or was this an act of reckless defiance? Was humanity truly ready to stand alone in the vastness of space? It was Aragar, the Zethar delegate, who broke the silence. His blue skin gleamed in the light, his insectoid eyes narrowing in disbelief. The Zethar were one of the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy, and their empire had controlled vast swaths of territory. The idea that a species as young as humanity would openly defy them was incomprehensible. His voice rang out, sharp and accusing. You think you can simply walk away. You think your actions won't have consequences. The Galactic Council has kept order for millennia. And you, human, think you can just turn your back on that. The room became even quieter, all eyes now on Sarah. The Zethar were known for their merciless ways, and their word carried weight. They had a reputation for annihilating any species that threatened the balance they had so carefully curated. Yet despite the venom in Argar's words, Sarah remained calm, her composure unshaken. She had anticipated this kind of reaction. "We do not seek conflict," Sarah replied, her voice steady but firm. "But we will no longer be controlled. Humanity has fought for its survival countless times. We have survived wars, plagues, and civil unrest. We are not asking for your permission. We are here to seek mutual respect, not to bow down to your centuries-old rules." The council members shifted uneasily in their seats, the tension in the room palpable. Argar hissed under his breath, but before he could retort, the Osmian delegate, a species known for its wisdom and neutrality, raised a slender, translucent hand. The Osmians had long been considered the peacekeepers of the galaxy, acting as mediators in conflicts that threatened the peace of the Council. "I believe," the Osmian delegate began, their voice calm and measured, "that we should not rush to conclusions. Humanity has shown great resilience and ingenuity. We cannot ignore their potential." The delegate paused, allowing the words to sink in. "Perhaps we should reconsider their place within the Galactic Council, not as subordinates, but as equals. We must not let arrogance cloud our judgment." The Osmians' words had an effect. Some of the more neutral species in the Council, who had watched humanity's rise with curiosity, now seemed to consider the possibility. If Earth had truly reached a level where they could stand on equal footing with the galaxy's oldest species, then perhaps they deserved a seat at the table. However, not everyone was convinced. The Taxelnock delegate, a tall and gaunt species with sharp features and a calculating nature, immediately spoke up. "Equality?" The Taxelnock's voice was cold, and its words felt like a rebuke. "Humans have proven themselves dangerous and unpredictable. You speak of them as if they have mastered the ways of diplomacy, yet they have only just begun to understand the complexities of the galaxy. They have no right to demand a place in the Council based on their bravado." His words were sharp, but they resonated with many of the Council members. The Selnock were known for their meticulous strategies and their ability to assess situations with cold precision. They didn't view humanity's rapid progress as something to be admired. They saw it as a potential instability in the fabric of galactic governance. "Perhaps the Council has underestimated humanity," Sarah responded, her eyes locked on the Selnock delegate. "But we've learned quickly. We've forged alliances with those you thought beyond our reach, and we've adapted technologies that even some of your oldest empires would envy. We didn't get here by playing it safe. We got here by fighting for our place." There was a ripple of surprise among the delegates. The sheer audacity of the statement struck a chord with many, especially those who had once believed humanity would cower before the might of the galaxy's older species. Sarah's words were a declaration of independence, not just from the Council, but from the notion that humanity was a lesser species. As the room buzzed with speculation and whispered conversations, a sudden voice rang out from across the chamber. The delegate from the Thraxian Empire, an imposing insectoid creature whose presence alone seemed to fill the room with tension, stood. The Thraxians were known for their aggressive nature and ruthless conquests, and their empire spanned across multiple star systems. They were not a species accustomed to diplomacy or peaceful negotiations. "Enough of this," the Thraxian delegate bellowed, his voice a terrifying combination of clicks and growls. "Humans may have their pride, but they have no place here. They will submit, or they will be crushed, just like every other race that dared challenge the established order." The Thraxian delegate's outburst left the Council in a charged silence, but Sarah didn't falter. She could feel the weight of the moment. She understood that the Council's response to humanity's independence would shape the future of her species, but she also understood something else. Humanity had already proven that they could stand their ground. If the Council chose to destroy them, it would not be a simple victory. They would face a fight like nothing they had ever encountered before. Her voice rang out clear and resolute. If war is what the Council wants, then it will have one. But humanity will not back down. The statement hung in the air, and for a brief moment, the entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath. The fate of Earth, of humanity's place in the galaxy, now rested in the hands of the Galactic Council. Would they choose diplomacy, or would they push Earth into the fires of war? The answer would determine the future of the galaxy itself. The tension in the chamber continued to build thick and palpable, as the Thraxian delegate's words echoed in the ears of every representative present. His venomous declaration of crushing humanity left a heavy weight in the air. Every species in the Galactic Council knew the power and might of the Thraxian Empire, a species known for their ruthless and cold-blooded approach to both diplomacy and warfare. The challenge was now out in the open. The Thraxians, who had once respected humanity's courage, now regarded them as a threat, one that needed to be squashed before it could spread further. Sarah Lawson stood motionless, but her heart was pounding in her chest. The whole room was watching her, waiting for her to respond. She had known the risks of standing against the Council, especially with such powerful enemies as the Thraxians, but she hadn't expected the sheer hostility of their immediate response. The Zethar delegate's cold stare was unwavering, and the Selnock representative remained stoic, his calculating eyes never leaving her. The Council had always been dominated by species older, wiser, and more powerful than humanity, and yet humanity had decided to challenge them. For a moment, Sarah felt the weight of every decision that had led to this moment. She had stood before these beings before, tried to negotiate, tried to show that humanity deserved to sit at the table as equals. But now, it wasn't about negotiation. It wasn't about proving humanity's worth in their eyes. It was about survival. The future of Earth hung in the balance. Taking a deep breath, Sarah stepped forward, projecting calmness despite the chaos inside her. "We will not cower before threats," she said, her voice steady, but every word carefully measured. "If the Thraxians think that fear will drive us to submission, then they are mistaken. We do not fear death, nor do we fear war, but we will not fight without reason. If we are to be destroyed, let it be because we refuse to let anyone dictate our future, and if it means standing up for that future, then we will stand firm." Her words sent a ripple through the chamber. Some delegates exchanged uneasy glances, while others looked on with grudging respect. The Zethar delegate, ever the pragmatist, shifted slightly in his seat. "You speak of honor, but what you truly seek is power," he said, his voice laced with skepticism. "You think yourself worthy of the same position we have held for millennia. Your species is still young, still unpredictable. You cannot simply expect to reshape the galaxy on your own terms." Sarah didn't flinch. "We are not asking for power," she replied calmly. "We are asking for the right to determine our own fate. Humanity will never beg for a place at the table, but we will fight for our right to sit at it. We have shown time and time again that we can adapt, that we can rise to any challenge. We will continue to prove that the future of the galaxy is not written by the strongest, but by those who are willing to fight for what is right." The Zethar delegate's sharp features twitched slightly, perhaps in recognition that Sarah's words carried weight. But the Selnock delegate, ever the cold strategist, merely tilted his head. "You are not wrong in your assessment of humanity's resilience," he said, his voice filled with a quiet disdain. "But resilience alone will not save you. There are far more dangerous forces at work in the galaxy. Forces that have the power to destroy your species before you even have the chance to prove yourselves. It is not enough to fight. You must also understand that diplomacy is the only way forward." "But diplomacy is not the answer when it comes to survival," Sarah shot back. "I understand your point, Selnock, but you've been living in a system of peace for so long that you've forgotten what it takes to survive. You are blind to the realities of the universe outside this room. Peace can be broken, alliances can shatter, and what you call order can crumble at any moment. Humanity understands this, because we've been living it for centuries. We know that diplomacy, while important, can never be the sole path forward. The chamber fell silent once more as Sarah's words hung in the air. She had struck a chord. The older species, for all their wisdom and history, had become complacent. They saw themselves as rulers, as the keepers of galactic order. But Sarah was right. While diplomacy had been effective in maintaining peace for the galaxy's oldest empires, it was not enough in a universe full of unknowns. The galaxy was a place where empires could fall, where once powerful species could be wiped out in the blink of an eye. Humanity had learned that lesson all too well. The Osmian delegate, the voice of reason in most matters, stood slowly. Their transparent form shimmered faintly in the light as they observed the growing tension between the representatives. Perhaps, they began, their voice gentle but laced with authority. We should not dismiss humanity so easily. We have seen their growth, their capacity for adaptation. Yes, they are young, and yes, they are unrefined in the ways of the galactic elite, but that does not make them less valuable. They may not have the centuries of history that others do, but they have something that we may have lost, a burning desire to protect their future. Sarah felt a surge of hope. The Osmian delegate's words carried the weight of years of wisdom. If they were starting to see humanity in a new light, there was a chance the council could be swayed. But not all were convinced. The Thraxian delegate's mandibles clicked with frustration. You speak of protection, but you ignore the fundamental truth. The galaxy cannot be protected by every species that demands to have a say. There must be order, and that order is maintained by those with the strength to keep it. But is that strength what the galaxy needs? Sarah countered, her voice sharp. Strength alone leads to chaos. Strength without wisdom leads to the destruction of civilizations. We are offering something different, something new. A future where every species has a voice, where we don't live under the shadow of the strongest, but in cooperation with one another. It may be a difficult path, but it is the only path worth following. The room shifted again. Some of the delegates seemed to be leaning toward Sarah's vision. Others remained locked in their old ways, unwilling to entertain the idea that humanity's defiance could lead to a better future for the galaxy. The Selnock delegate was silent, calculating. The Zethar, ever the pragmatists, seemed unsure, and the Thraxians, of course, were not swayed. Yet there was a growing sense that humanity's place was no longer just a possibility. It was a certainty it could no longer be ignored. We have come this far, Sarah continued, her voice rising with conviction, because we have refused to be cowed by those who would dictate our lives. And if the galaxy insists on treating us as lesser, then we will face that challenge head-on. But we will not fight for the sake of war. We fight to create a future where humanity stands equal with you all, not beneath you. And no matter what happens in this room, we will continue to fight, because we will not let our destiny be determined by others. The room was still. The words had been spoken, and for the first time, it seemed that humanity's future in the galaxy might not be decided by the might of ancient empires, but by the will of a species that had yet to fully realize its potential. Whether the Council accepted humanity's bold stance or rejected it, one thing was clear: humanity would no longer be silenced. As the chamber remained quiet, an uneasy silence hung in the air. The weight of Sarah's words continued to reverberate across the room, sinking into the minds of the delegates. Humanity was no longer merely a player in the galactic game. They were a force to be reckoned with. The Thraxians, who had once regarded humanity's boldness as a potential asset, now saw it as a threat. The Excelnoc, with their cold, logical approach, found it difficult to understand how a species so young and unpredictable could be a true partner in the galaxy. The Zethar, while pragmatic, were beginning to see a glimmer of potential in humanity's resilience. Sarah stood tall, her heart racing, but her demeanor unshaken. This was no longer about diplomacy. It was about ensuring humanity's survival and securing their place in the galaxy. The older species had underestimated humanity for far too long, and now they were starting to understand that the future of the galaxy would not be shaped solely by those with the longest histories or the greatest powers. Humanity's strength lay in its unpredictability, its determination, and its ability to adapt. After a long pause, the Zephyr delegate, Aragar, finally spoke, his voice low but laden with authority. "You speak of cooperation, humanity," he said, his cold eyes fixed on Sarah. "But cooperation requires trust, and trust is not something that can be earned with mere words. The Thraxians are not the only ones who see you as a potential threat. What happens when the rest of the galaxy sees humanity as nothing more than a rebellious child, fighting for attention? You are challenging millennia of established order. The balance that has kept the peace is delicate. You would have said it with your arrogance." Sarah's gaze didn't waver. "We are not seeking to disrupt the order for the sake of chaos, Argar. We are seeking a seat at the table, a voice in the decisions that will shape the future of the galaxy. The idea of peace you hold so dearly has been maintained through the suppression of those who were deemed lesser. Humanity will not accept that fate. We do not believe that peace can exist only when certain species hold power over others." Aragar's eyes narrowed as Sarah's words sank in. He was not accustomed to being challenged so directly, especially by a species as young as humanity. He opened his mouth to speak, but it was the Selnok delegate who interrupted, their voice calm yet filled with a certain icy sharpness. "You mistake the situation, human," the Selnok delegate said, their cold, reptilian gaze settling on Sarah. "Peace has been achieved through balance, not suppression. The older empires maintain order, and it is this order that ensures prosperity for all species. You claim that you seek equality, but what you truly seek is power. You want to break the system that has kept the galaxy in check for millennia. Can you truly handle the responsibility that comes with such a demand?" Sarah's resolve only strengthened in the face of the Selnok's icy tone. "We are not asking for power," she said steadily. "We are asking for equality. We do not want to topple the established order. We want to be part of it. Humanity has fought for its survival, for its independence, and now we fight for our right to determine our future. The galaxy cannot remain stagnant. It cannot continue to be governed by those who think themselves untouchable. We are a new force, yes, but one with the capacity to shape the galaxy in ways you cannot yet understand." The Selnok delegate remained silent, their calculating eyes studying Sarah. They were not swayed easily, but even they could not deny the passion and determination in Sarah's voice. The room shifted again, as if some delegates were beginning to rethink their initial stance. Humanity's fight was no longer seen as a mere rebellion. It was a movement for survival, for equality, and for the right to determine their own place in the galaxy. The Thraxian delegate, however, was not so easily moved. He let out a sharp hiss, his mandibles clacking together in annoyance. "You talk of equality, but what do you know of true strength?" He sneered. "The galaxy was forged through war, through the will to dominate, to conquer. Your species, with all its talk of fairness and cooperation, is weak. You cannot hope to survive in a galaxy where power is the only language that matters." Sarah met his gaze unflinchingly. "We have survived on Earth not through war, but through resilience. We have faced every challenge thrown at us, and we have risen. We do not fear war, but we do not seek it either. We fight because we must, but our strength is not in our weapons. It is in our will to continue, no matter the odds. If the galaxy is truly governed by power alone, then perhaps it is time for a new era to begin." Her words hung in the air, charged with an intensity that sent a ripple of unease through the chamber. The Thraxians were not accustomed to being challenged in such a way, and it was clear that the other delegates were beginning to question their assumptions about humanity. The question that had been raised by Sarah's bold declaration was no longer about whether humanity could join the ranks of the galaxy's greatest powers. It was about whether the galaxy was ready for humanity's kind of leadership. A voice from the back of the chamber interrupted the tense standoff. It was the Osmian delegate, their soft voice cutting through the rising tension like a calm breeze. "Enough," they said, their translucent form glowing faintly. "We have all heard enough of this bravado. It is clear that humanity has earned the right to speak, to be heard. We may not agree with them, but they have proven time and time again that they will not be silenced. Perhaps it is time for the Council to recognize that a new era is on the horizon, one where strength is not defined by the power to destroy, but by the will to survive and adapt." The Osmian's words sent a wave of murmurs through the chamber. There was a growing realization that perhaps the galaxy had become too entrenched in its old ways. The established powers had ruled the galaxy for millennia, but Sarah Lawson's words were a reminder that the universe was always changing. The galaxy was not static, and humanity's presence could no longer be ignored. As the delegates absorbed the Osmian's words, Sarah felt a flicker of hope. It was not enough yet to win the argument, but it was a sign that the Council was beginning to open its mind. Humanity's future would not be decided by the arrogance of the Thraxians or the cold calculations of the Xelanok. It would be decided by the collective will of those who believed in the possibility of a new future, one where humanity was not a bystander, but a leader. The room fell silent again as the Council considered what had been said. It was clear that the path forward would not be easy. The older species had their own agendas, and the Thraxians were unlikely to back down. But one thing was certain: humanity had made its mark on the galaxy, and the Council would never look at them the same way again. The fight was far from over, but the seeds of change had been planted. And no matter what came next, Sarah knew that humanity would stand firm in their quest for their place in the stars. The atmosphere in the chamber had grown thick with tension, and the silence that followed the Osmian delegate's words was unbearable. Every eye was locked on Sarah, each delegate contemplating the weight of her actions and words. The debate had taken a new turn. Humanity, once seen as an upstart species, was now a force to be reckoned with. Whether they liked it or not, the Council had to take humanity seriously. But the question remained: would they bend, or would they push back? Sarah Lawson, standing before the galaxy's greatest powers, felt the weight of her responsibility. This was no longer just a debate. This was humanity's future. The survival of Earth, the hope for peace, and the dream of equality were all tied to the outcome of this meeting. The odds were stacked against them, and yet Sarah held her ground, unwavering in her resolve. They would not be cowed. They would not be intimidated. The Thraxian delegate's deep growl broke the silence. "Enough of this." His voice rang out like a command, demanding attention. "Humanity's defiance is one thing, but what you fail to understand, human, is that your race is not prepared for what lies beyond this chamber. You talk of equality, of peace, but your people are nothing but children playing in a universe far too dangerous for them." Sarah met the Thraxian's gaze without flinching, her voice steady and strong. "We are children to you, yes, but we have fought wars and survived. We've made enemies, and we've faced destruction, but we've always come out stronger. You underestimate us, Thraxian, and when you underestimate your enemy, you make the greatest mistake of all." The Thraxian delegate's mandibles clicked in irritation, his sharp eyes narrowing. But Sarah's words seemed to have struck a nerve. He was used to intimidating weaker species into submission, but humanity was different. They didn't submit. They fought back, even against overwhelming odds. The room shifted uncomfortably as Sarah continued. "If we are to be destroyed, it will not be by the hands of any single species. It will not be by the Thraxians or anyone else who seeks to impose their will on us. Humanity has survived countless threats throughout our history, and we will continue to survive. We fight not because we seek war, but because we will not bow to those who would try to destroy us." There was a brief moment of stunned silence as Sarah's words hung in the air. Even the Zethar delegate, who had been watching with skepticism, seemed to reconsider his stance. The tension in the room was palpable. It was clear that the old guard of the Council, the species that had held power for millennia, was beginning to see that humanity was no longer a simple player to be dismissed. The Zethar delegate, Aragar, spoke again, but this time his voice was less certain. You speak of survival, but what makes you think that you can truly stand against the might of the Thraxian Empire? They have crushed entire civilizations, and you think you can match them. Your species is still in its infancy compared to the galactic giants. You have no allies, no ancient empires standing beside you. Sarah's eyes burned with determination. We don't need ancient empires to stand with us. We don't need allies who fear to speak the truth. Humanity is strong because we know what it is to survive on our own, to face the impossible and come out on top. We have made our own history, and that is what sets us apart. The Excelenok delegate, who had been silent until now, leaned forward slightly, his sharp gaze focused on Sarah. And what is it that you think you can offer the galaxy? You claim to fight for survival, but what is your plan beyond that? You speak of strength and resilience, but those alone will not change the balance of the galaxy. Do you have any idea what you're truly facing here? Sarah's voice remained calm, but it held the fire of a species that had never known how to quit. I don't need to have all the answers right now, but what I do know is that humanity is willing to do whatever it takes to ensure our place in this galaxy. We won't sit idly by while the established powers dictate our fate. You call it arrogance, I call it survival. We're not asking to be given a place in the galaxy. We're taking it. Her words left a stunned silence in their wake. The idea of a species taking its place at the table of galactic powers was nothing short of revolutionary. For millennia, the Council had been made up of species that had dominated the galaxy for untold years. The very notion that a young species like humanity would force its way into this exclusive circle was unheard of. And yet there it was. Humanity, bold and unyielding, had made it clear that they were not going to be a passive participant in the galaxy's future. They were going to fight for it. The Osmian delegate, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke again. Their voice was soft but powerful, as always. There is wisdom in what you say, human. The galaxy cannot remain stagnant forever. There is always room for change, and perhaps it is time for that change to come from the unexpected. Perhaps it is time for the Council to recognize that humanity is not simply a species to be disregarded. The room seemed to hold its breath as the Osmian's words lingered. Sarah looked at the translucent delegate, the being whose kind had always been the voice of reason, the peacekeeper of the galaxy. If the Osmian was beginning to see the truth in humanity's claim, then perhaps, just perhaps, the tide was beginning to turn. But the Thraxian delegate was not ready to yield. Change. He sneered. The only change I see is a species too arrogant for its own good. I have had enough of this. If humanity thinks it can survive without the might of the Empire, then let them prove it. But know this. When the time comes, you will regret this challenge. The Thraxian's threat hung in the air like a storm cloud, but Sarah did not back down. Let the galaxy see what happens when the oppressed stand up against the powerful. Let them see what happens when humanity refuses to bow down to anyone. If war is what it takes to prove that we belong, then we will fight. But we will not go down without making our mark on the galaxy. The tension in the room was unbearable. The Thraxian delegate's threats had only fueled the fire in Sarah's heart. She knew the risks. She knew that what she was doing could ignite a war that would ravage the galaxy. But humanity had no choice. The path forward was dangerous, and yet it was the only path left. As the debate raged on, one thing became clear. Humanity's place in the galaxy had been secured. Whether the Council accepted it or not, humanity was no longer just a minor player. They were a force to be reckoned with. And no one, least of all the Thraxians, could ignore them any longer. The atmosphere in the chamber had grown increasingly tense, each word spoken carrying the weight of what was at stake. The Thraxian delegate's furious glares, the Selnok's cool calculations, and the more neutral species looking on with cautious interest. Everything pointed to one undeniable truth. Humanity was shaking the very foundations of the Galactic Council. As Sarah stood at the center of this storm, she could feel the full force of her actions crashing down upon her. This was more than just a meeting. It was the beginning of something monumental, something that would echo through the galaxy for years to come. But there was still so much left unsaid, and the challenge was far from over. Humanity had made its point, but the Council had not yet decided whether they would accept or reject this bold new position. Sarah's words had struck a nerve, but the true test of humanity's place in the galaxy had yet to come. Would they back down in the face of the overwhelming might of the Thraxians, or would they continue to stand firm, knowing that the future of their species hung in the balance? The debate raged on for hours, each species offering their objections, counterarguments, and solutions. The Thraxians, still angry from Sarah's earlier defiance, argued that humanity had no place challenging the long-standing power structures of the galaxy. The Selnock delegate expressed doubts about humanity's capacity for sustained peace, citing their violent history and unyielding independence. The Zephyr, ever the pragmatists, questioned whether humanity's unpredictable nature would lead to peace or destruction. The room was filled with voices clashing, some filled with fear, others with disdain, and a few with cautious curiosity. But amidst the arguments, Sarah stood resolute, her gaze unwavering. Every word she had spoken, every challenge she had thrown at the Council, had been in service of one singular truth: humanity would not be relegated to the sidelines any longer. And yet, in the midst of all this chaos, something unexpected happened. The Osmian delegate, usually the voice of reason, who had been quiet throughout the heated exchanges, raised their hand, signaling for silence. The room fell still, the arguments fading into the background as all eyes turned toward the glowing, translucent figure. The Osmian had always been the mediator, the one who stood apart from the conflicts, offering solutions without bias. But now, they had something different to say. Perhaps, the Osmian began softly, their voice carrying a weight that cut through the room. The galaxy has forgotten the true nature of strength. We speak often of power, of dominance, of peace achieved through fear and suppression. But Sarah Lawson speaks of something different: strength through resilience. Perhaps it is time to reevaluate what truly makes a species capable of leading, not through the power to destroy, but through the will to endure and adapt. A murmur ran through the room. Sarah's words had already planted seeds of doubt in the minds of the Council, but now the Osmians' quiet support had given those seeds room to grow. Even the Thraxians, who had been the most vocal in their opposition, paused to consider the implications of what was being said. The idea that strength could come from resilience rather than force was radical, and yet it was undeniably true. Humanity had proven time and time again that they could survive even in the face of overwhelming odds. Sarah's heart raced, but she remained calm. The Osmians' words had given her a sliver of hope, but she knew that the battle was far from won. If anything, it had only intensified. The Thraxians were not about to relinquish their position easily, and the Selnock were known for their methodical, almost emotionless approach to diplomacy. But with the Osmians' voice now on her side, humanity's argument had gained a new level of legitimacy. As if to underscore the Osmians' point, the Selnock delegate spoke once again, their cold, reptilian voice slicing through the growing tension. Resilience? The Selnock's tone was skeptical, but there was something in their words that betrayed a deeper consideration. You speak of resilience as though it is enough to win the day. But resilience alone cannot ensure long-term stability. Without the discipline of power, there is only chaos. Humanity may survive for now, but what of the future? What of the galaxy's future? Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady but fierce. We're not asking for stability through submission. We're asking for a galaxy where we can forge our own path, where survival doesn't mean bending to the will of those who have held power for millennia. We are not here to challenge the balance of the galaxy for the sake of chaos. We are here because we believe that balance can only be maintained if every species has a say in the future. We believe in the strength of diversity, not conformity. The Selnock's eyes glinted, and Sarah could see a flicker of doubt in their calculated gaze. For the first time, they were listening, not just hearing, but truly considering. The battle for humanity's place in the galaxy was far from over, but this small shift in the Selnok's demeanor was a sign that the tide might be turning. Then the Thraxian delegate spoke again, his voice brimming with disdain, but also tinged with something else. Uncertainty. You claim to offer something new, but what do you truly offer? Humanity is young and untested. Your people are too reckless. What happens when the galaxy is thrown into chaos because of your ambition? Are you prepared to bear that burden? Sarah did not hesitate. We are prepared for whatever comes, but we are not willing to let others decide our fate for us. We will face whatever challenges arise, just as we always have. Humanity's future will not be shaped by fear. It will be shaped by our ability to stand firm, to adapt, and to forge alliances based on mutual respect, not submission. The Thraxian delegate's expression darkened. He had not expected humanity to respond with such conviction. They were supposed to be the underdogs, the species that could be controlled, manipulated, and pacified. But Sarah Lawson had broken that mold, and now there was no turning back. The room was silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. The delegates were no longer simply debating, they were reflecting. For the first time, humanity's strength had been acknowledged. The galaxy had been forced to reckon with the fact that humanity was no longer content to be a silent player in the galactic game. And as Sarah stood there, amidst the scrutiny of the galaxy's greatest powers, she knew one thing. Humanity had taken the first step. The Council would never be the same again. And no matter what happened next, humanity would make its mark on the stars. The chamber had grown quiet, but there was no peace in the air. The debate was over for now, but the outcome hung in the balance like a blade above them all. Sarah Lawson stood at the center of the storm, her heart pounding in her chest as the weight of the moment pressed down on her. It was clear now. The Council had heard humanity's message, loud and clear. But would they accept it? Or would they continue to view humanity as a pawn in a much larger game? The room was divided. On one side, there were those who saw humanity's potential, who recognized the strength it had shown in standing up to the established powers of the galaxy. The Osmian delegate, who had spoken in humanity's defense, was a force to be reckoned with. But there were others, like the Thraxians and the Selnok, whose pride and desire for control could not be easily swayed. Humanity's rejection of their power structures was a threat they could not easily ignore. Sarah had no illusions. She knew that the galaxy wasn't going to simply hand over its power because humanity had spoken up. But that was never the plan. Humanity didn't expect to win by mere diplomacy. No, this was about sending a message. It was about showing the galaxy that humanity would no longer kneel, would no longer be a subordinate species, waiting for permission to survive. They would fight for their place. A low murmur spread through the council chambers as the Thraxian delegate stood again, his large, imposing frame towering over the others. His eyes, fierce and predatory, locked onto Sarah. "Your species talks a lot of big words, human," he growled, his voice like the sound of gravel crunching underfoot. "But words alone will not change anything. The galaxy runs on power, and you do not have it. You are nothing but an insect compared to us." Sarah's gaze did not waver. The Thraxians had been bullies for too long, ruling through fear and intimidation. But she wasn't afraid. Not anymore. She had come this far, and there was no turning back. "We may be small, Thraxian, but that doesn't mean we can't stand up for ourselves. Your threats don't scare us. You want to test us? Fine. But know this. We will not be crushed under your boot." A tense silence followed her words. The Thraxian delegate's mandibles twitched in barely contained fury, but he didn't respond immediately. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next move. The other delegates exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of how to proceed. It was clear that the balance of power was shifting, and no one knew where it would land. The Osmian delegate, who had long been the voice of reason, spoke up again, their voice resonating with authority. "We have witnessed something truly remarkable here today. A species that once cowered in the shadow of the galaxy's giants is now standing toe-to-toe with us. Humanity's strength lies not in their might, but in their resolve. They fight for their place in this galaxy, and that is something we should not dismiss." The words were like a beacon of hope to Sarah. It was the recognition she had been waiting for, the acknowledgement that humanity had earned the right to sit at the table. The Osmian had always been one of the most respected delegates, and their support carried weight. It was no longer just a handful of voices in favor of humanity. There was a growing movement within the council that recognized the need for change. But the battle was not won yet. The Thraxians and Selnok were not about to yield easily. They were still focused on the long-standing order they had maintained for centuries. They believed in control, in domination, and they viewed humanity's defiance as a dangerous challenge to everything they had built. "Change is one thing," the Selnok delegate interjected, his cold, reptilian voice slicing through the air like a sharp blade. "But a shift in the balance of power is not something to be taken lightly. If humanity wishes to fight for its place, then we will make sure they are prepared for the consequences." Sarah stepped forward, her posture firm, her voice steady as steel. "We are prepared. We will never back down from what we believe in. We have fought wars, we have faced extinction, and we have come through it stronger every time. Humanity will not be a footnote in this galaxy. We will carve our own path, no matter how difficult the road." The tension in the room was palpable. Every delegate, every species in that chamber, knew that humanity's words were not empty. They could sense the truth in them, the determination, the resolve, the fire in humanity's heart. But the question remained, would the council allow them to forge that path, or would they stand in humanity's way, clinging to the old order? It was the Osmian delegate who spoke once more, their voice calm but powerful. "Perhaps it is time the galaxy learned to accept the new reality. The old powers have held the reins for too long, and it is not a bad thing to allow new voices to rise. It is time for the Galactic Council to evolve. And perhaps humanity is the catalyst for that change." A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. There was uncertainty, yes, but also the faintest trace of hope. The possibility of something new, something better, was starting to take root. The council, for all its power and history, was beginning to realize that it could not survive if it didn't adapt. Sarah's heart raced, but she kept her composure. She had said everything she needed to say. Now, it was up to the council. The Thraxian delegate's glare was like fire, but even he couldn't ignore the growing number of delegates who were beginning to see the wisdom in humanity's stance. The Exelenok, though still skeptical, seemed less certain of their previous dismissal. The Zethar, always pragmatic, had grown silent, but their eyes now held an unspoken curiosity. The atmosphere had shifted, just enough to show that humanity had earned a place at the table. Sarah knew the fight wasn't over. There would be more battles, more negotiations, and more challenges ahead. But for the first time, humanity had earned the right to fight on equal footing with the galaxy's greatest powers. The galaxy had heard humanity's voice, and it had no choice but to listen. As the council session came to a close, Sarah stood tall, her gaze unwavering. Humanity had made its mark. The council may have been shaken, but it was only a matter of time before the full impact of what had transpired today became clear to all. Humanity's future was uncertain, but one thing was certain: they would fight for it, no matter the cost. And the galaxy would never look at them the same way again.